what?
Each student's a protector.
Yeah.
Do you have one of those chocolate croissants again?
Darth!
What just happened?
That's a sign. It's an omen. Oh, it's an omen.
Can you teach a class in that
Oh my
today?
god, if you teach the class in that, I will sit down and pay attention because
What would I'm filming this?
So?
it's not like they haven't been in the class before, they know.
How about it? I'll do it on.
No.
Do it on Friday.
Today.
You have to do it in your southern accent.
Dr. Ray, you don't know what you're doing. You're killing me.
Down.
Oh, come on. Buck up.
Just take your hair down.
Wait, are we going to use the lab block? Please no.
I don't know, maybe.
Please no.
It's within my rights.
If we use the lab
Please, I already
can
told
we
my
go
dad
to Dragon Ball
9:45.
Because
Well, why did you do that?
Because I forgot we had a lab block, and I think it was a sign that we shouldn't have it. Please. My mom and my sister are still asleep because they had a snow day, and my dad drove me to school, so I'd have to come, and this is my only class. Please.
The whining. Wow. Okay. So we ended the war on whatever the last day was at Appomattox Courthouse. And today and Friday is about the post-war world. And one of the interesting things to come out of the war is a semantic change. Before the war, these United States was what you saw in print and in speech, a plural designation for this country. After the war, the years and decades after the war, it's the United States. What's the difference?
singular, yes.
Oh, plural was singular.
Because it was, these makes it sound like a bunch of different individuals, but these is a country.
Yeah. It's two letters. It's not a seemingly big change, but from a kind of conceptual standpoint, it really is a pretty big change. And the legacy of the war is one of centralization. The federal government becomes exponentially bigger, and it never becomes smaller. The Civil War and World War II and the Great Depression are the two periods in which the government, as we understand it today, as this massive entity, comes into shape. Prior to the Civil War, federal government for most people is a very distant thing. They have very little contact with it. After the war, that's not the case, and it will never not be the case again. And from a conceptual standpoint, this seemingly small change is actually pretty big. So, let's get to the immediate aftermath. Let's go to the smaller picture. The Union armies did a very good job of destroying the South. This is in Richmond in April 1865. Lincoln toured Richmond just a couple weeks before he died, walked the streets of the Confederate capital. The Confederates burned the city on their way out of town the first few days of April 1865 as Lee retreated towards Appomattox Courthouse. They're having fun over there. We're having fun here.
Can you just
That's
put the
not what I
Darth
was
Vader
told.
mask
It
on,
sounded
please?
like they were pushing out their chairs this
It did sound like that. That's interesting.
They're walking by. Thank
Oh, look at that.
Those look like freshmen, though.
So
So they
I'm a
can't be
freshman.
expected to maintain
Yes,
focus
they
on a
can.
day like
you. Can
this.
you just please put the Darth Vader mask?
Dr. A,
No.
Friday.
But
Dr. A,
it's
I might be
important
forced
because
to
it's
go
about
to the bathroom and never come back. I'm
Zoe
losing
always
it
falls
today.
asleep in the bathroom.
I'm
Maybe we'll just
struggling.
do it as a class.
Come on, everybody. Let's rally.
She doesn't deny
Let's
it.
rally.
Yeah.
No!
Come on.
Do the
No!
Let's rally. All right, here we go. Rally. So, Richmond could stand in for any number of cities like Richmond, utter destruction. Basically, the entire southern economy is destroyed. 9,000% inflation. A fifth of the adult white male population is dead. Utter destruction. But even before the war is over, Lincoln is thinking about the post-war world. And in December 1863, a month after he delivers the Gettysburg Address, the same month that the Capitol Dome is completed and the 19-foot-tall Statue of Liberty is placed on top, he issues his Proclamation of Amnesty and Reconstruction. An olive branch to the South. And in it he says, if 10% of a state in rebellion takes a loyalty oath, then they can organize a new government for that state and re-enter the Union. Basically, he's trying to divide Southerners against each other. And he offers them a full pardon and their ability to keep their property. They will not be treated as traitors, as those who have committed treason. It's a very magnanimous gesture, and it shows his overriding desire to bring the Union back together in such a way as to minimize animosity. But in Congress, you have radical Republicans, as they're called. These are the same people who were calling for abolition all along. People like Senator Benjamin F. Wade and Representative Henry W. Davis. And in the summer of 1864, while Grant is fighting Lee in Virginia in a series of incredibly bloody battles, they issue an alternative amnesty-ish plan, but it's a lot harsher than Lincoln's because these are radical Republicans, and they view the South as needing radical reconstruction. That we can't just put the pieces back together again as they existed in 1860. The South is, in many ways, broken, and we need to rebuild it from the ground up, reshape that society. So the Wade Davis plan says that if 50% of a state in rebellion takes an oath, 50% of the population that voted in 1860 takes a loyalty oath, then they can form a government. So Lincoln said only 10% need to take a loyalty oath. Wade Davis says 50%. But they go beyond that. They say part of that loyalty oath is a pledge of social and legal equality for blacks. Question?
10% plan, I mean, when they take the oath, they just need to admit emancipation. They don't have to admit social equality.
Yeah, Lincoln is much more about, let's just put this thing back together again on the grounds of the Emancipation Proclamation. But Lincoln is not, I don't think anybody's going to accuse Lincoln of necessarily being radical. He is certainly not a centrist. Oh, hey, she made it. Impressive.
I know.
Lincoln has Republican colleagues who are, oh, I'm filming it because you and Julie aren't here.
Oh, that's so nice. Wow.
I think you should still wear the red face.
You didn't even have to come.
Stop!
What are you doing?
What are you doing? I'm seceding.
Here, I'll move this here.
Want to secede with us, Maggie?
It means I can go back to school.
Maggie
You
just
can complain
seceded.
about
Wait,
it.
Valkyrie, the emancipation thing wasn't part of the 10% plan, was it? Like, the 10% plan was like they can have their own government, their own state government again?
Yeah, but slavery's gone. That's off the table. That there was maybe a chance that they could have saved slavery in 62, but by 63, that ship sailed. Okay, so neither of these plans go into effect. And so the issue of what are we going to do to the South is basically pushed off to the end of the war. But as the war is winding down, things start to happen in the field that will have far-reaching consequences for the post-war world. And one of those things is done by William Tecumseh Sherman down in South Carolina. In January 1865, he's moved his army from Virginia, and he's moved up into South Carolina, and he issues Special Field Order number 15. Doesn't have a very sexy name. Extraordinarily radical field order. He sets aside 400,000 acres of land along the South Carolina lowlands and on the Sea Islands, which are literally islands in the sea, off the coast for freed slaves, for freedmen. And 40,000, give or take, freedmen are given land. They're given 40 acres each, and they're given mules from the army. And this is, many people argue, the genesis of the kind of commonly heard refrain, 40 acres and a mule. He's doing this on his own authority. He's going far beyond what the government in Washington is offering. He's basically giving away confiscated Confederate land. Though not many people are directly affected by this, just 40,000. This idea will have broad consequences in the post-war world. Zoe, question.
Sorry, some clarification. 40 acres and loaned mules, these are given to the freedmen.
Yes.
But so what about the 400,000? Oh, okay.
All right, so there's about 400,000, give or take, acres down here in the old rice lands, the lowlands, very, very good farmland, and the Sea Islands, which is also very good farmland. Some of the best cotton in the world is grown on the Sea Islands. The most expensive dress shirts you can buy are Sea Island cotton.
That's a scent too. It's like a
Yeah.
the smell. It's
See,
like
I
cinnamon
have
cotton.
you can buy it at Bath and Body Works.
It smells really good.
Yeah? I did not know that. Now I know that. Does it smell like an expensive shirt?
It smells like laundry.
You say a long
What? It smells like lingerie?
No, laundry.
Laundry!
thought you said
That makes a
laundry.
lot more sense. Okay, laundry. Makes a lot more sense. Well, sorry.
I'm sorry. We went over my issues with
If you're just talking to Southern accent, you promise that and you haven't done it.
You said
Why
you do
was
want
this-
Yeah, that's one of the reasons for it.
Well, the thing is, this. Okay, I'll do it on Friday when we're actually doing the
But you're
Southern
doing it on
repression
Friday.
stuff. But today is about Northern Reconstruction in the South, and it would be wrong to be using a South. I'll do it on Friday.
Well,
Okay.
And on Friday, in Darth Vader helmet,
Yes.
Southern accent,
Okay.
as I
Can
am
we film that?
repressing the freed slaves on Friday.
Can we film it?
No,
Can I film it for personal?
no, no. Back in Washington, a progressive organization is set up in March '65 called the Freedmen's Bureau that's charged with helping these newly freed people find their way in the world. Because, okay, so you've freed 4 million slaves. Well, it's not like these people have any money. They were barred from being educated. They're just going to all of a sudden be successful and prosperous? Recognition is that these people are going to need a leg up. They're going to be a pretty significant leg up. They're going to need help. And education is going to be one of the major first steps. So there's something like 3,000 schools set up. In this is Freedmen's School. Teachers descend on the South. Teachers descend on the South. Thousands and thousands of them to these schools. Freedmen's Bureau closes up shop in 1870, but has a, for the size of the organization, size of the Bureau, a really impressive impact on this now free slave population. That being said, not everybody's on board. certainly not in the South, but even in the North, with what's happening here in regards to the freed slaves. This is a broadsheet. It's a poster that would be put up during election season in the North. It's quite racist, but then again, a lot of Northerners were quite racist. A lot of Northerners resented the money being spent to bring this freed slave population out of the darkness. So this is from 1866. Yeah, 1866, I believe, in Pennsylvania. The Freedmen's Bureau, an agency to keep the Negro in idleness at the expense of the white man. Twice vetoed by the President, President Andrew Johnson, who we'll meet in a second, and made a law by Congress. Support Congress and you support the Negro. Sustain the President, Andrew Johnson, again, who we'll meet in a second, and you protect the white man. And you have this horribly racist caricature of a freed slave here. It has the costs incurred by the Freedmen's Bureau, $7 million to this point. So it's a compare and contrast. You have the, quote, idle Negro here, who is just getting money from the government, which he's not, compared to the hard-working white man here. The white man must work to keep his children and pay his taxes. This is not an anomaly. There is rampant, widespread racism in both North and South. And a lot of resentment here in the immediate aftermath and years after the war about any money being spent to help the black population of the South. And this is in Pennsylvania. So it keeps talking about the president here. President, sustain the president. President is twice vetoed. Well, the president they're talking about is not Abraham Lincoln. Because on the 14th of April, 1865, ironically, Good Friday, 2 days before Easter, Lincoln, now less than a week after the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, 10 days after he toured the Confederate capital of Richmond, decides to have a date night with his wife. And they go to Ford's Theater.
Don't do it, Lincoln. Don't go to the closet.
My great-grandfather or great-grandmother always used to say it's like that's what you get for going to the theater on Good Friday.
You're not supposed to have fun.
Yeah, you're supposed to be miserable.
Does he not look miserable?
He doesn't look miserable.
He's been really working hard
Yeah?
for 5
Does
years.
this look like misery? This looks more like misery than that does.
Look at the man's face.
Look at our faces.
It's like he hasn't slept in a half-decade.
Yeah. Look at this.
My pineapple.
My eyes are burning out of my skin.
Cucumbers, right? Just
No, it doesn't work.
so he goes to Ford's Theater, see a play. Waiting there is an actor whose family is like the superstar actors of the day, the Booth family. He's kind of the other Booth brother. His father and brother are much more successful actors. And he's a Confederate sympathizer. And during the war, he had conspired with others in a plan to kidnap Lincoln in order to arrange for the release of Confederate prisoners. But then the war ended, so, well, that plan went out the window. And so the new plan is to assassinate not just the president, but the vice president and the Secretary of State, the Secretary of War, all on the same night, April 14th, 1865. He is successful. His co-conspirators are not successful. And he'll be shot while trying to escape to the South about 2 weeks later. Lincoln had not been a popular president. Not by any measure. In fact, been a quite unpopular president. In the North, obviously, as well in the South. His assassination, though, completely changes the narrative. And his funeral train, traveling back to Springfield, wait for it, Illinois, not Massachusetts capital, is seen by an estimated 1 million people. And the outpouring of emotion is unprecedented. This is the first president to be assassinated. He will not be the last. How many presidents have been assassinated?
Well, 9 have died in office.
But how many have been assassinated?
No, wait.
9 have died in office?
I don't know. I was looking this up the other night.
I'm gonna go with 2 to 3 assassinations.
No, wait. So Lincoln wasn't Harding? No, that was.
Are we talking about attempted assassinations or real assassinations?
Like completed.
2.
2? I don't think 2.
Wait, while they were
2
in
to 3
office
is
or just
right.
during their life?
Well, the 2 numbers are the same.
2,
2?
3,
But wasn't,
Lincoln and Kennedy?
but
Yeah.
wasn't Harding or someone else?
3.
Harding died in office of natural causes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
2.
going
Oh, yeah.
2.5.
2.5. James Garfield. James Garfield, anyone?
I don't know who that is. I'm sorry.
Assassinated.
3. That's right.
William McKinley.
Oh, 4.
Assassinated.
4.
4. So the new president is, ironically, a Democrat. He was chosen in 1864 to blunt McClellan's campaign. He is the only senator from the South to remain loyal during the war. He's from Tennessee, and he's a Democrat, Andrew Johnson. Now, he was not a former slave owner. He grew up very, very poor, and in many ways completely resented the slave-owning class of the South. And he's chosen in the 64 election as Lincoln's running mate as a kind of olive branch. The Republican Party who chose him obviously didn't think that he would end up being the president because he's not a Republican. So let's meet 17th President of the United States, first president to be impeached but not removed from office, Andrew Johnson.
For a model on how to run his new presidency, Johnson looked to a former president with whom he shared a home state and a very similar name, Andrew Jackson.
Couldn't they be the same person? Because generally Jack is a nickname
must
for
be
John.
observed. And Johnson picked that up and used that
Conspiracy.
throughout his.
Are you suggesting that Andrew Jackson, in fact, did not die, but somehow
He was
survived,
dead.
made himself younger, changed
Well,
his last name to Johnson, and assumed the presidency upon the assassination of Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah,
Dr.
that's
Alexander.
what happened.
That's
exactly
an
what
interesting
happened.
theory. Play that out.
He was undead, so anything's possible.
I think you were thinking of John Calhoun.
John Calhoun
No,
was a
they're-
zombie. Andrew Jackson was
Wasn't he just
Look at
generally
her
undead?
Jackson.
Career, and the argument can be made that he was the last
He was a
Jackson.
vampire.
Like Jackson, Johnson believed he was the voice of the common man, or at least the common white man.
He's probably the most racist president we've ever had. And he talks about blacks as savages, barbarians, and he really thinks they should just go back to work on the plantation and leave the public sphere to whites.
When Johnson took the oath of office, the Civil War was essentially over. Now it was up to the tailor from Tennessee to stitch the tattered Union back together. His entire legacy would be staked on the question of Reconstruction.
Well, I think the Reconstruction crisis was the greatest crisis in American history, other than the crisis in the Civil War itself. Because what was at issue was not simply bringing the South back into the Union, but defining the essence of the American nation. Who is going to be a citizen of the United States? What are the rights that citizens are to enjoy? Who is an American, basically?
Among the most eager to learn about Johnson's policies were the so-called radical Republicans, the vocal, reform-minded wing of the party. Men like Pennsylvania Representative Thaddeus Stevens and Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner. They believed the South should be punished and the freed slaves protected, made citizens, and given the right to vote.
Johnson played the role very skillfully in those first few weeks. And immediate reaction is, yes, we trust Johnson and we can deal with him. Then Congress leaves Washington not to come back again until December. So Johnson has that wonderful window of opportunity there to take over as president.
What Johnson did with his opportunity was to come up with his own presidential Reconstruction plan. Many in the defeated South were prepared for the worst.
In April 1865, the South lay prostrate at the feet of the conquering North, and many Southerners then were so shell-shocked that they would have been willing to accept almost any terms of Reconstruction. Johnson came in thundering revenge, punishment to these same people, and in their despair, well, they thought, oh my God, this is what our fate is going to be.
You not seen that much snow in your life.
But Johnson had a pleasant surprise in store for the dispirited Southerners.
You have candy.
They are a conquered region, but he doesn't want to treat them
Thank
as
you.
a conquered region.
Thanks.
These are his people, after all.
We have 3 pieces.
What? I call one.
Roll one,
Roll
I call one.
Dark chocolate Hershey Kisses.
Call one.
Sydney.
Ha!
Oop,
Yep.
a little short.
Yeah.
Match.
Nobody knows for sure what Lincoln would have done, but Johnson's plan favored amnesty for most ex-Confederates and quick acceptance of the seceded states into the Union. The freed slaves got little protection. They weren't guaranteed citizenship or the right to vote.
Johnson was on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of morality, on the wrong side of politics. He just was unable to recognize that the Civil War had changed the nation, that the emancipation of the slaves carried with it some obligation to protect the basic rights of these emancipated slaves.
When Congress comes back to town in December of '65, Johnson announces that the restoration of the South has been completed. And that is startling news to members of Congress.
So we have a quandary here. Are we going to restore the South, as Johnson believes is only necessary? Or are we going to reconstruct the South? The radical Republicans believe the South is rotten. We need to rebuild it from the ground up. Johnson, on the other hand, says, oh, no. Guess what, guys? While you were on vacation, I fixed it all. We're all cool now.
Congress immediately started passing Reconstruction Acts of its own, beginning with an extension of the Freedmen's Bureau, a measure begun under Lincoln to aid the transition of blacks from slavery into freedom. Johnson vetoed it.
And from that point on, that will be the story of the relationship between Congress and the President. Congress passes, Johnson vetoes. Congress passes, Johnson vetoes.
Johnson's 29 presidential vetoes shattered the previous record of 12, which was set by his hero Andrew Jackson.
When you hitch your presidential leadership to the veto wagon, you're not going anywhere. And Johnson, stubborn and defiant that he was, refused to see that.
Now it was Congress's turn to make history. Beginning with the Civil Rights Bill of 1866, they realized they had the votes to override Johnson's vetoes. Their record of overturning President Johnson 15 times still stands. Throughout 1866 and 1867, Congress hammered away at Johnson's authority.
How do you override a veto?
2/3 majority.
2/3 majority in each house. 15 times. So he vetoes 29 bills, almost all of them about Reconstruction, and they override 15 of them. Needless to say, the relationship between the Republicans in Congress and the Democratic president, not exactly rosy.
In March of 1867, they passed the Tenure of Office Act, limiting the president's ability to remove appointees without the Senate's consent. It was a trap, and Johnson couldn't resist the bait. He suspended and later dismissed his Secretary of War, a holdover from Lincoln's cabinet.
Take no prisoners was his attitude. And of course, that inspired the other side to fight back in the same way, and that's why he was impeached.
By violating the Tenure of Office Act, Johnson gave the radicals in Congress an excuse to get rid of him. Articles of impeachment were drafted.
Opposition only made him more and more stubborn. He was unwilling to meet his critics halfway. He was unwilling to listen to criticism. So he just destroyed his own presidency.
In February of 1868, the House of Representatives made an unprecedented move, voting to impeach the president. Their charges were flimsy at best and clearly politically motivated.
Johnson's the target of a vast left-wing conspiracy.
He thought the impeachment was an outrage. He said the people who are violating the Constitution, impeaching me for violating the Constitution, should be the other way around.
A trial in the Senate would determine whether Johnson's misdeeds amounted to the high crimes and misdemeanors required by the Constitution to remove him from office.
So how does impeachment work, constitutionally speaking? The House impeaches, the Senate does the trial. So there have been 3 impeached presidents in American history. Andrew Johnson is the first. Who's the second?
Oh.
President Clinton was impeached, acquitted in the Senate. Nixon was impeached. It did not get to trial in the Senate. He resigned. So actually, because impeachment's a 2-step process. The House impeaches, the Senate then tries. No president has actually been impeached, convicted in the Senate, and removed from office. Question, Maggie.
Have you seen like those Valentine's Day cards where they're like things in pop culture? It's like there's this one. It's my favorite one of all time, where it's like
About Andrew Johnson?
No, it's about Bill Clinton.
Oh,
It's a picture of Bill Clinton, and it says, "I would definitely have sexual relations with you."
I did not have sexual relations.
It was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
They have a
goodness.
president. They have like a president set.
Yeah, they're hilarious.
James K. Polk.
I don't know if he's on there. He's not important.
Anna, did you hear that?
I did.
Call your dad. Call your dad.
Well, her
If
favorite is
2/3 of
Miller.
the senators voted to convict him, the Johnson presidency would be over.
Tickets to this trial were like getting tickets to the Super Bowl. No, they were scalped outside the Senate chambers. It was a matter of great entertainment. It was like
I
a
didn't know
big
you could go to
athletic
those. You can pay to see
It
them.
was the... Well, there's a gallery above the Senate and the House
But
chamber.
like, do they
That's
sell them now?
awesome.
Well,
Let's impeach someone. I don't
well, no, you write to your congressman and they give you tickets, but they were selling tickets to the impeachment trial
That's awesome.
That's
and scalping them out on the steps.
I would pay
A
money.
social event in Washington, and the women and all that finery and the diplomats, everybody came to the Senate to see what was going to go on.
It was a circus, just as it was in 1999.
In the end, Johnson avoided conviction and removal from office by a single vote.
What's the guy's
Chastened by his run-in with Congress, Johnson passed the rest of his term quietly. After returning home to Tennessee, he would later become the only former president to be elected to the Senate.
Ironically, the body that nearly removed him from office by a single vote. Anna, question.
So, when he was impeached, the Republicans had enough people to impeach him.
Yeah.
But when the last person voted, he voted no, and he wasn't. Do you remember who?
No, well, I mean, the Republicans control both chambers. But the Senate generally is a more conservative body than the House of Representatives, in part because senators are chosen by state legislatures, they're not popularly elected, they're generally not as fire-breathing as the representatives are. And they saw this as a dangerous game, that there really was no constitutional grounds to remove him from office, and if you removed him basically for political reasons, then the whole system kind of breaks down. Then what's to stop this from happening again and again and again over political disagreements? And thankfully so, because this could have opened up a can of really nasty future worms. Zoe, question.
So they didn't charge him for political reasons. They say he violated.
Yeah, well, you have to, they kind of trumped up these, well, because all the Constitution says is high crimes and misdemeanors.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't define what a high crime and misdemeanor is.
What do they? So like misdemeanor, they're meaning like.
Well, because they passed this Tenure in Office Act,
Yeah.
and he removed Edwin Stanton without consulting them, the Secretary of War,
Yeah.
and they said, "Ha-ha! You've fallen into our trap. You have committed what we call a, quote, high crime or misdemeanor."
But the
Sorry?
book made it, like, the book implied that it was like oh, they put in the act and he kind of went around it. He didn't actually break because he suspended him.
Well, the thing is, I mean, he didn't commit high crimes and misdemeanors. It's a political fight. He does not agree with the radical Republicans' vision of what they're going to do after the war, and nearly pays for it with his office, acquitted by a single vote in the Senate. But at this point, he's basically sidelined for the rest of his presidency for the next year, and so it falls to the radical Republicans to take charge. Guys like Representative George W. Julian of Indiana, who says, quote, "The South is large estates, widely scattered settlements, wasteful agriculture, popular ignorance, social degradation, decline of manufacturers, contempt for honest labor, and a pampered oligarchy." Bless you, Hannah. He did not say that. "We must develop, quote, small farms, thrifty tillage, free schools." Schooling is a big thing. There are free public education in the North that doesn't exist in the South, and these Republicans believe fervently that a public, free educational system is super important. And that's why the Freedmen's Bureau main job is education. And they see the South as deficient and defective because of this lack of free education. The free schools, social independence, flourishing manufacturers in the arts,